hearken unto me. Verse 16. And it reads, So Zedekiah the king swore secretly unto Jeremiah, saying, As the Lord liveth, who made us this soul, I will not put thee to death, neither will I give thee into the hands of these men who seek thy life. Verse 17. Then said Jeremiah unto Zedekiah, Thus said the Lord, the God of hosts, the God of Israel, if thou wilt surely go forth into the king of Babylon princes, then thy soul shall live, and if this city shall not be burned with fire, thou shalt live in thine house. Verse number 18, the last one, and it says, But if thou wilt not go forth to the king of Babylon princes, then shall this city be given into the hands of the Chaldeans, and they shall burn it with fire, and thou shalt not escape out of their hands. Oh, man. Oh, man. The powerful words of God. So Zedekiah the king swore secretly unto Jeremiah. All right. Okay, they would live, okay? Jeremiah would be able to live. Let's go to Jerusalem will fall. Jerusalem will fall. Jeremiah, the 21st chapter, verses 1 through 7. Jeremiah, the 21st chapter, verses 1 through 7. Jeremiah, the 21st chapter, verses 21, Jeremiah 24, verses 1 through 7. Message concerning Judea, last 4 kings, Zedekiah, 21. All right. Jerusalem will fall. The sword which came unto Jeremiah from the Lord when King Zedekiah sent unto him Pashur, the son of Machirah, and Zephaniah, the son of Masenah, the priest, saying, Inquire, I pray thee, of the Lord for us, for Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, maketh war against us. If so be that the Lord will deal with us according to all his wondrous work, that he may go up from us. Verse 3. Then said Jeremiah unto them, Thus shall ye say to Zedekiah, Thus said the Lord God of Israel, Behold, I will turn back the weapons of war that thou art in your hands, which ye fight against the king of Babylon, and against the Chaldeans who besiege you outside the walls, and I will assemble them into the midst of this city. Verse 5. And I myself will fight against you with an outstretched hand and with a strong arm, even in anger and in fury and in great wrath. Verse 6. And I will smite the inhabitants of this city, both man and beast. They shall die of great pestilence. Verse 7. And afterward, said the Lord, I will deliver Zedekiah king of Judah and his servants and the people, and such as are left in this city from the pestilence, from the sword, and from the famine, and into the hands of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and into the land of their enemies, and into the hands of those who seek their life, and shall smite them with the edge of the sword. He shall not spare them, neither have pity, nor have mercy. Jerusalem will fall. Jerusalem will fall. God's telling the truth about what will happen to Jerusalem if they don't obey God. Jerusalem will fall. All right. 2 Kings 24:20 and 25:7. Jerusalem is defeated and Zedekiah is exiled. 2 Kings. All right. Okay. 2 Kings has returned. 2 Kings 24. Jehoiakim becomes subservient to Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. 2 Kings 24:20, and it reads, For though the anger of the Lord it came to pass in Jerusalem and Judah until he had cast them out from his presence, that Zedekiah rebelled against the king of Babylon. Zedekiah rebelled against the king of Babylon. 25 verse 7. Nebuchadnezzar besieged Jerusalem. 25 verse 7. And it says, And they slew the sons of Zedekiah before his eyes, and put out the eyes of Zedekiah, and bound him with fetters of bronze, and carried him to Babylon. God had told them not to go against Nebuchadnezzar. He had told them what would happen to him. All right. Now for the Sunday school lesson. Choose the life of justice. Choose the life of justice. Jeremiah, the 21st chapter, verses 8 through 14. Let us begin. Our key verse. O house of David, thus said the Lord, execute judgment in the morning, and deliver him that is spoiled out of the hands of the oppressor, lest my fury go out like fire, and burn, that none can quench it because of the evil of your doings. Jeremiah 21st chapter, verse 12. Our big subject for today is just reward. As a result of experiencing this lesson, you should be able to do these things. Number one, understand divine justice described by Jeremiah. Number two, appreciate that God is a God of justice. Number three, make a personal commitment to justify an advocacy for justice. Make a personal commitment to justice and advocacy for justice. Key terms: Babylonians, that's a Hebrew word, inhabitants of Chaldean. Falleth, that means to desert, surrender. Fruit, action, fruit used metaphorically, deeds, fruit. All right, the fruits of your labor. All right, you understand that as well, I hope. All right, let us begin. One of the most important things that we sometimes seem to forget why the lesson matters. Evil is pervasive throughout human society. Can people continue to do evil without consequences? Jeremiah tells us that God is a God of justice and will recompense evil. You will reap what you sow. If you do evil, rewards are there for you. All right, the lesson in focus. Reverend Jerome R. Rayner was the pastor of our congregation for 57 years before his death. His unique gift of expository preaching was sprinkled with common sense and unique metaphors that vividly explain doctrinal truth. One of these unique sermon titles was Get Off Broadway. The text for this sermon was Matthew 7:13 through 14 verse. Matthew chapter 7 verses 13 to 14, which related to Christ's teaching about the way of life open to humankind. In the closing section of the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus clearly drew the line between the way that leads to destruction and the way that leads to life. Reverend Raymer styled the way to destruction as Broadway, a metaphoric thoroughfare with all types of enticements that, if followed, led to God's eternal judgment and condemnation to hell. We were both warned and admonished to either get off Broadway or to stay clear of it. The text of this sermon and Christ's teaching has its foundation in Deuteronomy 30, verses 15 and 19. The choice of life or death, of the blessings or the curse, was set before the new generation of Israelites preparing to enter the promised land. Essentially, it was this: obey God and live, disobey God and die. Centuries after Moses' instruction, God through Jeremiah set before Judah and her leaders a simple, similar choice that could avert the total destruction of Jerusalem by the Babylonians. To remain in the city, resist them, would mean death. To surrender as captives would mean life. Judah eventually chose to stay on Broadway and experience God's full wrath because of her disobedience. Jerusalem and the temple were burned to the ground, and those who were left alive were taken captive and exiled to Babylon. Obey Christ and live. Disobey Christ and die. Clear words of instruction. Clear words of instruction. Obey God, live, disobey Him, and die. The lesson in context. The passage chosen for the exposition of this lesson occurs while Jerusalem was under siege in 589 and 588 BC. During this final siege, King Hezekiah sent two messengers to Jeremiah. Prior to this time, Jeremiah's predictions had been ignored or labeled as false. Now the enemy was at the gate. Hezekiah wanted Jeremiah to intercede for the city and seek God aid by miraculously overthrowing the Babylonians, as he had done the Assyrians during the reign of King Hezekiah. Those who had previously laughed at and ridiculed him were now desperately seeking his advice and assistance. Chapter 21 records the king's request and Jeremiah's response, verses 1 through 10, and the royal house responsibility and its failure to fulfill it, verses 11 through 14. It was futile for the Jews in Jerusalem to resist the Babylonian armies. That's in verse 10. Why did God expect from the king and David's dynasty? What did God expect from the kings and David's dynasty? Verse 12a. Why did the inhabitants of Jerusalem feel secure? That's in verse 13. Identify some false notion that caused some people who do not know God to feel secure. Thought for you there. Insight. The lesson clearly teaches that, number one, there is a limit to God's patience with his rebellious children. There's a message for us there. There's a message for you, Freddie. There's a message for all those that are listening. The lesson clearly teaches that there is a limit to God's patience with his rebellious children. Number two, all will receive their just reward according to the path they chose to follow. For centuries, God had been long-suffering with the nations of Israel because of his covenant with Abraham. However, the time came when he chose to fulfill his promise to curse and not bless because of their idolatrous disobedience. That's in Deuteronomy 30 chapter verse 15 and 19. They received their just reward because he gave them into the hands of the gods they chose to worship rather than him. And the warning and message to us, are the same today. God will not continue to strive with those who intentionally choose the path to destruction and not life. The saved must not take for granted his long suffering, but must seek to live in obedience to his word in view of the coming of the Christ, when all receive either blessings or curses. Now let's continue. Exploration. How can this lesson assist us in continued spiritual growth of us? How can this lesson continue in our spiritual growth? It can be used to remind us that there is a day of divine judgment coming when all receive their just rewards. That's a powerful word for us. Are there consequences attached to how